Okay then. Hello and welcome to Aquarium Studies Volume 4. I am your host, pannobhasa, and I've been meaning to do an aquarium update video for the past weeks, and I'm just now getting around to it because quite a lot has changed in the ecological balance of my main aquarium, and I'm just dying to share it with everybody. And also, there's a few maybe ecological, semi-philosophical questions that I would also like to discuss with regard to the whole idea of maintaining a more or less ecologically balanced aquarium. So I might as well just grab this right off the bat, grab Mr. Camera here, and show you what my aquarium is looking like nowadays. And let's see, gotta be careful. There it is. And one of the first things you may notice is that huge trout that's in the upper right hand corner that just swam downwards and now swimming back upwards again. That is the tiny little Siamese algae eater that I got a few months ago to deal with the algae problem. Those of you who have not been keeping up on my aquarium may know that I had kind of a lot of algae in this tank, and I had three little Otosyncless algae eater fish in there, plus a bunch of snails, and they were barely keeping up with it. It was still kind of out of control. Also, some black beard algae was starting to grow that none of my algae eaters particularly wanted to eat. And then I got zebra loaches, which none of them seem to be at the front of the aquarium right now, but they'll show up sooner or later, I assume. Let's zoom in a little bit, maybe. And these zebra loaches of the genus Botia, they specialize in eating snails. And so there was the snail apocalypse in this aquarium. All the snails died except for nerite snails, the ram's horn snails, and they pretty much all got eaten. And I'm probably not going to show you this, but in the corners, like back in that corner and back in this corner over here, it's just like a snail graveyard. It's just mounds of little snail shells mainly from the zebra loaches preying on snails. The mystery snails, large mystery snails, I just had to take out because they were starving to death. They were just closed up inside their shell to get away from the loaches. And so only the nerite snails could survive these loaches because they don't have any meat that sticks out past the shell. They can remain pretty much completely covered by their shell so that the loaches can't get at them. So anyways, when the snails were pretty much genocided, it caused a massive growth of algae, including black beard algae. And in the previous video I did before this one, you may recall or not, that over on that wall, that right-hand wall, was just like it was like a big patch of green algae. And after getting Rama I, that algae eater right there, is the biggest fish in the tank now, I'm pretty sure. He was about the same size as the cherry barbs, the little red guys. Let's just zoom in a little bit. When I first got him, he was maybe the size of those little red cherry barbs, maybe even a little smaller than that. And within like a month, he was like 3 times the size, and all the algae was gone. There's still a little bit of like diatoms, like that brownish color in the substrate there is largely diatoms, which counts as algae, I suppose. But Rama I, the Siamese algae eater, he has just taken over this tank. He's pretty much like the apex fish of this tank now. He's maybe 3 or 4 times as big as when I got him just a few months ago. And as you can see, he's just going over everything. He'll eat anything. He eats black beard algae. He eats any other kind of algae. He'll eat just debris, like decaying vegetative matter that's on the bottom there. He's a really good scavenger. Also, he'll eat minced clams. He'll eat anything else that the other fish eat. I mean, he'll eat anything. And so in the previous Q&A, when somebody asked me if I could only keep one species of fish, what would it be? It might just be just by necessity a Siamese algae eater, like that guy right there in the center of the tank, who's just kind of a brown, plain looking fish, but he just is like the apex scavenger. I mean, he just keeps the algae eaten. He keeps all the debris and stuff off the floor. I have to feed him zucchini and broccoli and stuff now just because there's not enough algae for him and the surviving snails, and still the 3 lazy Otosyncleses to feed on. And I think an Otosyncless is just kind of over in that corner. It's one kind of interesting change was like 3 or 4 months ago, the Otosyncless algae eaters went nocturnal. They would spend all day hiding in the back, and then they'd come out at night. Sometimes I'd come in here at night and there'd be 1 or 2 Otosyncless catfish that were just sticking to the front glass, feeding on what little algae they could find. But like maybe 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden they stopped being nocturnal again. And so now they're like swimming around in broad daylight again. And I really do not know why it is that the Otosyncleses started off just kind of not really caring what time it was, and then spending a phase of maybe 2 months or more being strictly nocturnal, and now all of a sudden they're coming out in broad daylight again. And I should probably be paying more attention to what's going on in the fish tank here, so I can point out any new developments or point out individual fish. There's an Otosyncless over there sticking to that little palm tree looking water wisteria, and just a month ago you'd never see that during the daytime. They would just all hide in the back where the snail graveyard is. And with regard to new fish, the number of fish is exactly the same as it was last time. Like all of the cherry barbs and the loaches and so forth are still doing well. All the gouramis. There's Attila there, the dwarf gourami. Although just last night, my sweetheart added a female betta to this tank, and it still hasn't really adapted yet. And I'm pretty sure that it's hiding behind the thermometer or some such, so that you won't be able to see the female betta. You might see another female betta if I show my sweetie's tank a little later. But aside from that, almost the only innovations is I added this little Anubias plant that, my elbow just slipped off the table, that's adhering to a piece of wood. And my pearlweed is finally starting to grow like pearlweed is supposed to. But that's kind of new. I think that was new the last time I did the video. And finally it's putting up green shoots and so forth. The suer tang is doing well. Water wisteria for some reason isn't doing very well in this tank. I'm not sure why. The Hornwart is monstrous as usual. I just pruned it back a couple times in the last 2 days. Otherwise, that blob of green plant material there would just fill this tank right now if I weren't pruning it back. And that is actually a good thing, and it's something that I'm going to bring up before this little video is finished. So I guess one other unexpected change in this tank is the Java moss, which is that forest, that thicket of mossy looking stuff right there. I had no idea that this moss would grow like 8 or 9 inches thick. I've had to start pruning it, like mowing it on top, just to prevent that also from taking over too much of this tank. And it is really good to have something like this Java moss growing in like a biologically balanced fish tank, because not only does it provide a lot of surface area for biofilm to grow on, which serves as food for other organisms, but it also provides hiding places for small creatures, baby fish, which really I don't have any of, but also like amphipods, other small creatures can get away from the fish by hiding in that thicket of moss there. This suer tang that's sticking out from the rocks is also fairly good for that sort of thing, and the hornwort also is it's got like little needles, like little tendrily things instead of leaves that provides a lot of surface area and also a lot of hiding places. So that my gouramis, especially like the one that just swam by there, I think that's Ildico. They're grazing on this, like the algae eater. He'll come over and like graze on it or pick through it himself also. So that's pretty much the developments. The algae has pretty much ceased to be a problem since the Siamese algae eater, the new king of the aquarium, has been added. I hope he's not going to get a whole heck of a lot bigger than he is right now. But he's like the dominant fish now. And the loaches should be visible. I mean, I haven't really been watching really carefully. There's a zebra loach back right there. I still have 4 of those. They seem to be doing fairly well. Although I have a problem with these loaches. They're the most skittish fish I have. When I'm reaching down to like prune back a plant or something, the gouramis are just tame. They're like little dogs or something. They'll just swim right up to my hand, maybe even nibble at my fingers a little bit. The other fish, they're pretty cool. The zebra loaches, let's see, there's an Otosyncless on the rock there. But the zebra loaches are very skittish, and they'll just swim away and hide. They have more wild instincts, I guess. And also, because they're so active, that they have a higher metabolic rate. And so it's hard to feed them. It's like if I throw pellets in here that slowly sink to the bottom, these other fish, the barbs and the gouramis and the Siamese algae eater will eat most of it before it gets to the bottom. So it provides me with a problem of making sure the zebra loaches that are hiding, very active, but also skittish, that they're getting enough to eat. So sometimes I'll have to take a pinch of food that sinks and reach down with my arm and just kind of scatter it down here, and then feed flakes and stuff up at the top for the top feeding fishes. And let's see here. What do we got going on? Otosyncless busily feeding on whatever it can feed on under that little Anubias plant there. Rama I just always hunting for food and getting most of his food, I hope, at least a lot of it, just from eating algae and just decaying vegetable matter and so forth. And there's some zebra loaches coming out to make an appearance. And there's starting to be more snails that are surviving. I think the zebra loaches are just getting lazy and preferring to eat minced clams and so forth than go to the trouble of actually killing a snail. And I suppose I should just do a quick examination of the other 3 tanks in this room before I do any of the philosophical, ecological stuff. So this is my invertebrate tank, which now has 3 endlers in it. See, I'm inheriting fish from my sweetheart's tanks because I needed endlers to feed on an algae bloom in here, which the algae bloom is gone. In fact, a lot of the life forms that were in this tank are gone, and you may notice that it's been taken over by shrimps. That most of these little red guys swimming around aren't fish. Those are Neocaridina shrimps. And I started off with 6 of them, and there's now dozens. There's probably at least 50 of them in here. Also, there's a lot of Gouramis amphipods that hide really well, and they're camouflaged. They're more of a wild type creature. That there's lots of those. I could put a piece of broccoli the size of the end of my thumb into this tank, and within 24 hours, it's completely gone. The shrimps and the amphipods especially are eating it. The worms are all gone, including like the little white speck detritus worms that were all over the glass for the first several months of this aquarium's existence. It's all gone, and I assume it's because of a crustacean population explosion. Not just the shrimps, but also the amphipods. They're just eating anything that amphipods can eat, including some of the baby shrimp, I think, because the shrimp population is largely stabilized. It had like a population explosion of shrimps. There's still most of those guys swimming around are Neocaridina shrimps. I don't know, this looks kind of blurry. So I think there's been like finally the crustaceans have started reproducing really well. You still got the two main snails, Righteous Fist of Apocalyptic Chaos and also Leroy Jenkins in there. They're kind of still the kings. I think that's Righteous Fist right there, motoring along. He's a mystery snail, and they can't really survive with zebra loaches very well because they got these long tendrily antennae and stuff. Lots of snail meat sticking out past the shell that the zebra loaches will be pecking at. So this hornwort, I've got to prune this back regularly, which is actually a good thing, and I'll get to that. There's a little endler over there, that little orange guy, kind of like a miniature guppy, although they're not going to reproduce because the 3 that are in here are all male, and that's good. I don't want a fish population explosion in here, as well as a shrimp and amphipod population explosion. So in a way, the ecological balance in this tank has stabilized, but it's also simplified because some of the species that used to be common in here, including annelid worms and so forth, are now pretty much missing. And in fact, I used to have some of the same Java moss that is forming a thicket in my 32-gallon tank. There was quite a lot of that in here, and that's all disappeared too. I assume that hungry amphipods, they're willing to eat Java moss. And so the Java moss is all gone. The suer tang seems to be doing well. But mostly it's just a bacopa plant and this wad of hornwort and some suer tang on the bottom. That's pretty much all there is left in here. Few dead leaves to add some surface area for biofilm to grow on, and just stuff for amphipods and so forth to eat. So that's my little 10-gallon tank, which originally one of the main purposes for this is I was going to breed gouramis in this tank, but we haven't gotten to that stage yet. I haven't really succeeded in breeding any kind of fish yet. So let's just move on to the cichlid tank of my darling woman, which got rearranged recently. And there's really not much change in this. She rearranges the rocks every once in a while so that it looks different, but all the fish are the same. We did have some of the cichlids. There's that female right there has got a mouthful of either eggs or babies. That bright yellow fish right there. You can see that her mouth is full. Oh, I think she swam away. And when she's like that, she won't eat anything because her mouth is either full of eggs or babies. And they've had babies a few times already, these cichlids. The blue ones are the males and the yellows are the females of the same species. They're a kind of Mabuna dwarf cichlid from some lake in Africa. But unfortunately, there's not enough plant life in this tank yet for the babies really to survive. We had some babies get born, and maybe 3 weeks later, there was still at least one baby that was like hiding in the plants, feeding on biofilm and so forth. But eventually, predatory adult cichlids and also these tiger barbs fed on them. And there's 3 little plecos, like algae-eating catfish, that also eat rotting wood that live in here, but you rarely see them. They're very reclusive and they like stay hiding behind the rocks and so forth. So you don't really see them very often. So mainly this is just a 2 species kind of a tank. And there's still one snail. You can see like a yellow mystery snail there. I think its name is Nanner. And a few more plants added, but a lot of the plants got taken away. And then over here is the betta tank that has some shrimps in it now, and it's kind of taking off ecologically. It's starting to get like a good plant growth in the substrate, and the shrimps are doing fine. This female betta, which is a little bit deformed possibly from inbreeding, and also has like an eating disorder because one of the reasons why my sweetie had to put the other female betta into my tank was because the large female betta that's kind of down there on the bottom wriggling around was just eating all the food, and now it's like obese. Well, there's shrimps and snails. There's no real like scavenger fishes in this little tank. It's mostly just for 2 bettas and a little bit of shrimps and some snails at this point. And apparently the snails and the shrimps are doing an adequate job of scavenging, so we don't really need algae eater fishes or anything like that. So let's just go back here, highlight my main tank here, and you can see it's getting nice and jungly. And when I first started this tank up, I wasn't really familiar with the philosophy of setting up fish tanks, especially ecologically balanced ones. Gotta rest my elbow on my knee here, hold it a little steadier. And so I just put plain sand in there. It's just a kind of coarse sand that I got at the fish store. And that's all there is for like soil in this, except now for organic material from the plants and from fish poop and so forth, maybe getting into the interstices between the sand grains and forming a little bit more of an actual soil than just sterile sand. And I thought that I had made a mistake, and maybe to some degree I did, because nowadays the biologically balanced or ecologically balanced fish tank people are saying you should put a layer of like from 1/2 inch to 1 inch of like potting soil or mud underneath your sand, just so that the plants will have nutrients to feed on and they'll grow better. And in my case, the water wisteria might be growing a heck of a lot better than it is. It's kind of weedy looking. That one's just like a palm tree there in the back corner there. That bacopa in the middle back there, I mean, it hardly grows at all. Even though I've got root tabs, which are a kind of solid fertilizer that you can stick next to the plant in the substrate, it just doesn't work as well as actual potting soil under the substrate. And so for a long time, I thought I made a mistake. But more recently, I had watched some YouTube videos about how the potting soil eventually exhausts itself. And so that an aquarium that has soil under the sand or under the gravel, it will just exhaust itself after like maybe 3 to 5 years. And then you have to like redo it. Otherwise, the plants will just start kind of, they'll just stop growing and start dying off because they require good nutrients in the sand. So I kind of avoided that whole problem by planting mostly plants that don't need good soil. Like this hornwart doesn't have any roots at all. It absorbs all of its nutrients directly from the water. These Anubias plants, the big one and that little one stuck to the thing there, they also don't have real roots. They got rhizomes for clinging to the substrate, but mostly they're getting their nutrients from the water also. Same goes for the Java ferns over in this corner. Same goes for the suer tang. So the only plants that have real roots in this tank are the water wisteria, which, as I say, isn't growing very well, and I may have to eventually replace it. Plus these the little cryptocorine and the pearlweed right there behind the Otosyncless that has suddenly become diurnal again. And so it may be, I have this theory that it may be actually to your advantage not to have the layer of soil underneath, and you just rely on plants that don't need lots of nutrients in the soil or in the substrate to survive, which is mainly the strategy I've adopted. And it does look pretty jungly and diverse in there. And there's lots of plant material that is helping to balance out the animal biomass. I mean, there should be more plants than animals in a balanced aquarium. And it caused me to start thinking about how if you're feeding your aquarium, and I feed my fish like once a day, maybe skip 1 day a week. So it's like I feed these fish 6 times a week approximately. And, sometimes it's just like little flakes and pellets like you buy at the stores. One of the main or best fish foods that I have is stuff that I bought from an Asian grocery store. And it's just freshwater clams, just little ones, the size of like a fingernail. And I just mince them up. I've just got them frozen, and, you just take a little bit and mince it up and just sprinkle it in there. And it's good nutrition, because it's better nutrition than just shrimp tails like some aquarium keepers will use, because you're feeding them the entire animal, like all the internal organs and so forth, or that was required to keep the clam alive is now keeping the fish alive. It's just like a balanced diet for carnivorous fish anyway. And then, as I said, sometimes I'll put some zucchini or broccoli, or also dried seaweed that I also got from the Asian grocery store. So some of the best fish food that I've feed to these fish, I bought from an Asian grocery store, just seaweed and like clams. And also we got some whole baby shrimps in brine that you have to kind of rinse out, get some of the salt out of them. But just in my desire, in my idea, or my ideal of having a biologically balanced tank, I keep thinking, like, if I keep putting food in there, I'm putting nutrients, adding nutrients to this system. And unless something is taking out some of those nutrients, there's just going to be like a buildup of certain kinds of nutrients. So, I mean, you've got bacteria in here that are feeding on a lot of the waste material of the fish. The fish are peeing into the water, and most of that is being taken care of by the plants that are absorbing it and using it as fertilizer, or the bacteria that are all over there in the substrate. They're all over the surfaces, and also they're in the filter. So still, I mean, not everything is going to be able to get turned into plant material or like fish biomass, or just get turned into a like nitrogen gas that just gets emitted into the atmosphere. And so somehow there has to be some way of maintaining a balance without nutrients just totally, some nutrient just building up and building up and building up until it potentially could become toxic. So that's one reason why there's like an emphasis on water changes among a lot of fish keepers. They just got to keep changing the water out just so that nothing will build up and become toxic. If you've got lots of plants, that very much reduces the need for water changes. In fact, there are some people like Father Fish who say you don't need water changes at all. But then again, he also says you don't need to feed your fish at all if you've got a really good balanced aquarium. And I've just got too many fish in here that I could get away with not feeding them. Some of them, if I just stopped feeding the fish in this aquarium, then some of them would survive. Probably more than half of them would just starve and die off, because there's just not enough to forage in here that's continually growing and like renewing itself to keep this kind of population of fish alive. So I have this idea that so long as I have to keep pruning back these plants, especially the hornwart, that is removing a lot of excess nutrients. So this hornwart is just absorbing nutrients out of the water and turning it into plant material, and it grows like crazy, so that I'm like trimming it back, pruning it back on a weekly basis. And that is helping to remove some of these excess nutrients that are continually, like almost on a daily basis, being added to this water. But still, maybe every 3 weeks or so, I'll do a 5-gallon water change just for the hell of it. But the ideal is to have a balanced system where you really don't have to do much at all to it. And once you've got, if I had fewer fish and nice jungly plants like this, then I could possibly even follow the Father Fish method of just not feeding the fish at all, even though I don't have any soil under the substrate to provide nutrients to the plants. It's mainly just a balanced system, and they're getting fish pee and fish poop for their nutrients that's coming from the food that's going in mostly, plus just whatever it is that they're salvaging, eating biofilm off the plants and so forth. But I do spend a lot of time just sitting back, observing my fish tank. I do think that a fish tank like this is better than a TV set. That it's a more wholesome way of spending your time, just sort of meditatively, just sitting back and gazing at the little world that's just working itself out in this tank. And it's all very nice. And sooner or later, there's a good chance I'm going to get another aquarium. It'll be my final one, though. I don't want to just relentlessly keep accumulating aquariums. But I'm thinking about getting like a 75-gallon aquarium with like some wild type green swordtails and maybe a nice little school of black neon tetras or some such. But that's possibly a few years in the future. And for now, this is my little world with the, up until recently, invertebrate tank being just sort of the backup. And it is a good place for harvesting this hornwort, because sometimes the hornwort in this tank, it'll get so covered with just sort of junk, detritus, that Rama I will just start eating it, and it'll just start kind of breaking it apart. There'll be like little hornwort branches floating everywhere, and the hornwort turns kind of a brown color from all the junk growing in it. So then I just pull that out and replace it with some of this pristine hornwort that's kept good and clean by all the amphipods that you can't really see. Maybe I could do the amphipod trick. Let's see if I could just tap this and see if it elicits any explosion of life. Yeah, I don't see any amphipods. They hide really well. But as you can see, there's plenty of shrimp in here now. Lots of baby shrimp. And in this tank, I mainly am using just a sponge filter for filtration, which mainly the way it cleans the water is just through bacteria. When I was a kid, people didn't really understand how filters mainly work. They think that you have to keep replacing the charcoal and this kind of thing. But really, the main way that an aquarium filter works, especially a sponge filter like this, is that it's just bacteria living on the filter. The water goes past the bacteria, and the bacteria feed on the ammonia and other like nitrites and nitrates that are the result of the metabolic processes of the animals, and turn it into something like just nitrogen gas that just evaporates into the atmosphere. So there we are. There it is. And I think we're done for this particular episode of Aquarium Studies. And so just stay tuned. I got a bunch of videos with Brian that are going to be coming out also relatively soon. And the Q&A every week. And like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and be happy.